So I travel a lot, okay? I traveled pretty much on the APAC side. I go Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, a lot of places. I work out of India. And I travel for work reasons. So that's the reason why my wife is never happy about it. Okay, she's like, you're always outside the home. So we decided, okay, let's go for a vacation. It's been really long that we have spent time together. Let's go on a vacation. And that was last minute, right? So it's like, okay, what do we do? And she said, I want to go scuba diving. I said, fine. Where do you want to go? She said, Bali. Like, wow, that's fantastic. But the problem was, it was last minute. The tickets were running really high. But wife is your boss, right? So I decided, let me go for it. And I booked my tickets. And we landed in Bali. The only thing with only one objective that we had is to do scuba diving. And we had 1 week of vacation. We landed in Bali. We did the scuba dive. It was just 2.5, 3 hours, the welcome stuff, the introductory dive, that's it. And then we were like, what do we do next? We didn't know. The scuba diving was amazing, so you can see the scuba monkey there. That's the Xamarin monkey inside the scuba. It was fun. But then we did a lot of things. I mean, we went around, we looked around, and we somehow managed to finish 1 week there. And when we got back, we was like, you know what? We wish we had booked the guided tour. It would have been much more better for our time and money to book a guided tour and go to the places that we really, it's worth going. We missed a lot of places. By the time we came back and looked at it, we missed a lot of places. And like, whoa, that's gone crazy. Now, this is exactly what I'm going to do with iOS 8, right? I'm going to take you to a guided tour so that you save your time, you don't have to go through all those documentations and all those things. I take you through some of those important points that you as a developer or iOS developer should know, and then we go through that one by one, okay? My name is Nish. I work as a developer evangelist here at Xamarin, and I work out of Bangalore in India. I do a lot of events in APAC, so if you're from, I don't see any of you from that side of the world, but if you are, then I would love to catch up with you. We can talk a lot about the APAC events that's happening at Xamarin. So iOS 8 comes with 4,000 APIs with 12 major ones, and a lot of changes to the existing, and a lot of upgradation with the features, right? Now, it will be difficult to cover entire thing out here, but we will definitely touch upon the most important ones. iOS 7, if you looked at, it's very shiny, right? For the end user, it was amazing. The user interface looks stunning. It was really cool with those flat design, the colors that came in with. It was amazing. Now, if iOS 7 was all about delighting end user, iOS 8 is all about delighting the developers because there is a whole lot of new APIs that's available from Apple that you can make use of. For example, using HomeKit, you can build the future home right now. You can pretty much do anything with your iPhone, with the home, right? HealthKit. Now, all your health information is integrated at one place. So we look at what's happened in HealthKit. And passcodes are becoming obsolete. With Touch ID in place, you can use the biometric authentication in your apps. You can authenticate. If you've seen 1Password, how they do it, it's fantastic. You can authenticate it right there, right? So what we're going to do today is touch upon these points. Alert controller. If you have worked with alerts in the past, you wouldn't have never worked with a controller. You would have worked directly with the UI alert view. But in iOS 8, you have a new controller. So we'll look at that. We'll look at what has changed in navigation controller. We'll look at what has changed in notification settings and notification actions. They work together. This is a slight change in notification as such. I mean, now users can actually reply to your text messages from the notification itself. So how do you do that as developers? How do you create actions? We look at all those things. We look at Popover presentation controller. This has been there in the iPads for quite some time. Now it's available in iPhones as well. So we'll see what happened there. We look at search controller. If you worked with search, there was search display controller. Now that's gone. It's going to be search controller, UI search controller. We'll look at what has changed there. We will look at split view controller, and then very nice visual effects that came in, the blur and the vibrancy effect. So we look at how do you do that in code. Collection views, there's a slight change there. This is totally new. There's document picker. There is health kit, core image, scene kit, and finally we'll look at the photo kit, right? So let's get started. Now, if you worked with alert views in the past, you would just say UI alert view, new UI alert view, and then pass in the parameters, title, description, and then you set the style. And then you say .show. Now that's gone. That's deprecated. You no more work with alert views directly. You will start working with controllers, just like you would work with any other controllers with iOS. So there is UI alert view controller. Now another thing is it also replaces the action sheet. So now you don't have UI action sheet. It's all integrated into UI alert view controller. And the way you're going to set it is by setting a simple property called preferred style. And then when you set it, you can just set either it's an action or it's an alert, right? Now, for the end user, nothing has changed. They still see the same thing. You can set the plain text style or secure text style or with some buttons. Those are actions. Now, here's how you do it in the code. You say where alert, UI alert controller.create, that's a factory method. You pass in the title, description, and the last parameter that's important. Now, that's where you set whether you want an alert or an action. If you set it action, the action sheet comes up. Otherwise, it's going to be a plain alert. Now, the next thing that you see is alert.addAction, which is nothing but a simple OK button that you're seeing there. So you have delegates. Now, you can have more buttons. That's if you want more buttons, you just go and say alert.addAction again, put another button. Say if you have some destructive action, let's say thrash, right, or delete. You want the button to be looking red, you can set all those properties while you add the action. And you have the delegates to handle that. And finally, you don't have show method. It's going to be present view controller, and you present it like how you present the regular view controllers. Right. Now, you've been working with, I'm assuming, you've been working with navigation controller? Have you been? Yeah. So it's a navigation stack, right? It's a parent controller which lets you push another view controller, which means you're navigating to another view controller. And then when you want to go back, you say .pop, and it comes up with a nice navigation bar on the top, which is again customizable, where you can add buttons and all those things. Now, what has changed is there are new support. That is, you can change the navigation bar size, and you can also do hiding. You can actually hide the navigation bar completely. Now, you could do this in iOS 7, but there's pretty hacks. Now, it's simple API given to you by Apple. You can simply go set these two things. One is hides bar on tap to true when you set this to true. When the user taps on the navigation bar, the bar is gone. And you have hide bars on swipe. Now, if you had to do that using a gesture, you had to add a gesture recognizer and all those things. Now, that's all gone. It's pretty much a simple property that you're going to set it. And then you can see that there's a small video that's going to come up. Yeah, that's how the bar goes away as you swipe it. OK, notification settings. Now, notifications would have worked in the past. There is local notification and remote notification. And the way you're going to do it is using the UI user local notification, UI user remote notification. You set the types. Now, this all has been encapsulated into one single class, which is UI user notification setting. And you set the type, whether it's a remote or local, and finally you register this notification setting. So all the old ways of doing it has been deprecated. So starting iOS 8, you should be using this notification setting. And you have this option called UI user notification type, where you can set, do you want an alert, badge, sound, all the three, some of them, you can all set it in the notification setting. Now, here's how you do it. You create a UI user notification type. In this case, I just want the alert and the badge. And then I create UI user notification settings and say get settings for type and pass in the type. Now, there is something called categories. We'll look into that a little later. And then finally, you don't register for local notification or remote notification. You just say register user notification settings and pass in this settings there. That's it. And as usual, the user will be asked, hey, this app wants to send you some notification. Do you want to agree or not? So you probably will have to handle it in the code if the user has not set it for you. Now, notifications settings works in conjunction with the notification action. Because if you've seen iOS 8, has everybody upgraded to iOS 8? Yeah? So now you know when the notification comes, you can actually reply to the text messages then and there. You can reply to the emails, right? There's buttons there. Those are nothing but actions. So that's a notification action. How do you get it? Is you basically subclass the UI mutable user notification action, or you can create it directly. And then you add the custom action. So here's how you do it. So on the left, you can see that there's a button called trash and accept. The way you get it is using UI mutable user notification action, and you pass in the identifier. So remember, identifier is very, very important here, because when the notification happens and the user clicks on something, your app delegate is going to be fired. And that's where you're going to identify what exactly is the action that was triggered by the user. So make sure you pass in the right identifier. And then you set the title, which is nothing but the button title. And activation mode, you can be in the foreground or the background. So if you're in the background, then all those background rules apply. Okay? If you're in the foreground, then your app is brought in front, and you can decide what you want to do with the app. You can set the destructive mode to true or false. Destructive mode true is basically it changes the color, and which in this case is like trash. And also, there's something called authentication required. Now, when this notification happens, the user screen may be locked. Now, if you want any action to be performed when the user is authenticated, then you can set this to true, so Apple will ensure that the user is enabling his authentication. Only then the action is executed. So you can see on the left, so when the notification happens on the lock screen, then the user will be able to swipe, and then the button comes up. Popover presentation controller has been existing in iPad for a very long time. And now it comes to iPhone. But the difference is, because of the real estate, it's not going to be a popover. Instead, it will be presented as a model view. Okay, we'll look at that. It's very simple. It manages popover content. So here's the code. You set the controller's model presentation style to popover. Then, when you present it, it is presented as a popover view controller. The rest of the code that you see is basically, it only applies to the iPad, because I want to show where exactly the popover has to come up, basically that arrow and all those things. So that's how you set it. Now, on iPhone, here's how it is. So the whole that I just graded out all this null check, because that's not going to be fired at all. It comes up as a model view. Okay? So you can just use the popover controller. Now, changes in search controller, I told you in the beginning that we used to use UI search display controller. Now, what used to happen is the search view was tightly coupled, where there is a search bar with the button, say, you put in some text, you search, and then there was a table view which gets populated, right? Now, this whole thing is tightly coupled. Now, that's gone. Now, what Apple did is you can use the same search bar, buttons, and filters that you can add, but when you search, the results can be in your own view, maybe a collection view or something else, something which makes it look beautiful. So that's why the UI search display controller is deprecated. So you will start using UI search controller, and the most important thing is you will be using this class, you'll be subclassing UI search results updating, and that has a method that gets fired whenever there is a search that happens. So as I told you before, results can be displayed in any view as you want. Now, here's the code. The first thing that you're going to do is you subclass search results updater, and then you will have the method update search results for search controller. Now, what you see is raise update search results. That's because I have an event, right? I'm raising that event so that I can handle the search results in a much higher level. So here's how you do it. There's the event that updates search results that I'm subscribing to. And when the search happens, I'm actually updating my search source, which is finally gets reflected on the search results controller. When you create the search controller, it'll ask you for what's your result controller. So you pass in the results controller, and then you also say, what's your search updater? That's all. And then in this case, if you see the table view, I'm just populating the same thing. It's the same search results. But you can actually populate into any other collection views or anything that you think is right for your app. OK, few changes to split view controller. The good thing is now it works on iPads and iPhones both. And the most important change over here is the preferred display mode. That has 3 enumerations. All visible, which means you have the master and detail that's visible to the end user. If you set it as primary hidden, that means the parent controller goes away and user can get it back while swiping it. You can also set the primary overlay, which is a small button with a popover. When you set it up, the presentation, the title view, the parent view controller comes in there, right? It's simple. All that you set is preferred display mode, and then you set it to all visibles, and then it's all visible there. Okay. In iOS 7, if you'd have seen, there are really nice effects that came in. Those vibrancy and the blur effect. If you've seen the lock screen, the way it blurs your background, it's amazing, right? Now, how do you achieve it? Until iOS 7, there are some open source algorithms that you can use to make it available in your app, but those were all expensive. Now, Apple gives you what it uses internally. So now that's available to you as an SDK, so you can actually subclass the UI visual effect and get the same blur effect and the vibrancy effect that Apple uses, okay? And it's going to be high performant as well. How do you get this? You create UI blur effect from a style, and you set light. There are 3 enumerations: light, dark, and extra light, okay? And depending on that, you get the blur effect. And then you create a UI visual effect view, because you need to set how much of it you want it as blurred. Maybe sometimes a full rectangle, or maybe a certain amount of rectangle, right? And then you add it to the view subsystem. Now, when you want what's a vibrancy? Vibrancy is basically sometimes when you have the blur in your view, you want to add some label on top of it, right? And that label, you want a vibrancy in that. Now, the way you do it is you set the frame, and then you create the blur effect. You create the vibrancy effect from the blur effect that you created, and pass in the vibrancy view. Set the frame, that's it. And then you create the label from, you add that label to that vibrancy view, so that that label, that position of the label is completely vibrant. That means that's not blurred out. So you get that thing. Now, in this image, if you see that monkey thing, you can actually, the actual sample is there in the documentation. If you move the monkey around, you can see that vibrancy is very dynamic. The blur effect is very dynamic, so it gets blurred on the fly, because you set the rectangle there, right? Okay. Collections views, if you've worked with the collections views in the past, collection views has a different layout subsystem, so they're independent from the collection view itself. So you can make the collection view completely dynamic. You can change the UI layout to whatever you want. By default, there is a flow layout, but if you want to change that, you can completely change that. Now, the change that has come to collection view is the self-sizing cells. So now you can get the self-sized cells in UI collection view by setting the estimated item size of the UI collection view flow layout. And this is how you do it. You create the flow layout and just set the estimated item size, then that particular size gets cell gets sized. Another thing is you can also do auto layouting to get those. If you see that sample, is that basically it's taking the label and depending on the text, it is getting aligned. You can use auto layout, or you can use the size that fits. You can override that method and then return that particular size that you want there. Okay, document picker is completely new in iOS 8. Okay, the good thing is now you can access the documents outside of your app's sandbox, right? So you can use a document picker. For example, if you want to pick the document of the user from an iCloud or maybe a Dropbox, right? Whichever is registered for, you can use the document picker to access this document. For example, say you want to access a PDF, you can do that, right? So there's no problem. There's no sandbox restrictions. So users can open directly, and the entire document opening happens right inside your app. Now, here's how you do it. First thing is you have to tell what types are you looking for. So you set uttype.pdf or image in this case. There are more enumerations, you can add that. And then finally, you have the UI document menu view controller, where you pass in the types that you're looking for. And the picker menu has this method called, has an event called didPickDocumentPicker, that gets fired. So I'll just show you right now. So when the user clicks on the top right corner, that button, this comes up. So that's the event, right? So it gives you that action sheet kind of thing with basically a menu options. So now you have iCloud there. So now user can pick the document, click on iCloud. He's navigated to the iCloud's view. He can go and pick this document, and then once the document gets picked, that did pick document gets fired. Now, for you to access this document, it's important that you, wire up that start accessing security scope resource and stop accessing. You have to be encapsulated inside that. It's important to get that, that's a security restriction. So you have to, then you can write your code that actually access, what you want to do after you access the document and move forward. Right. This is another thing, the health kit. Now, we all know that health information is very, very sensitive, right? So one good thing is Apple integrates this really, really well. So for example, you don't have to, for example, if you're building a health app, you don't have to work with independent SDKs to capture the information. Like, for example, body temperature. You don't want to work with another sensor, right? Now, those sensors directly can integrate well with the health kit, which means they can have the data directly inside the health kit. Now, your app can access it, obviously, with the user permission. And the things that you can do here is you can store. That means if you are somebody like Fitbit, you're creating you have some sensors, and you are accessing, you have the data with you, you can feed inside the health kit. So you can store and share the health data. You can create the data. You can save the data. And you can query the data. And remember, it's a highly secured access area. So you have to use the enumerations that Apple provides you with. So you are restricted to these classes. HK unit represents the unit of measure. So for example, body temperature, that's the unit of measure. HK quantity, it's actually together. It's with, say for example, if it's a body temperature, it could be Fahrenheit or degree centigrade. So you can set that plus whatever is the value, 99.9 if it's a Fahrenheit, then that's together, right? So that becomes an HK quantity. Now, another thing is it gives you a very nice way to do a conversion. So if you're converting from degree centigrade to Fahrenheit, it's taken care of. So that's because you're actually encapsulating everything inside the HK quantity. Now, HK object type is the actual type, what you're going to store. And the HK object is the data itself. So these classes are very, very important. Next thing is the health store. So everything that you do with HealthKit has to finally get into a store. So this is the secure data store. You have the health store. The first thing you will notice is the class is the HK health store. And the first thing you need to do is to check if the health kit is available on the device or not. So there is a property that which returns a true or false. So you ask for that, and then once it is done, then you have to write code for authorizing it. The user has to give you permission to access his data. Okay, and it is much granular level, which means he can give you body temperature, but he may restrict you from some other information, say sleep cycles, right? So it's a very granular level. So you have to write the code in a defensive fashion. You can save and query data. If you're querying the data, you will be using this class called HK query. The most important thing in the whole health kit is you will have to use those classes defined by Apple. You can't have your own stuffs. So here's how you start with authorization. The first thing you can see that I'm checking, is health data available? That's because some devices may not have, so, right? So you check that. And then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to create a temperature quantity. So the way you're going to create is using a factory method, HK object type.create, and you say what information exactly you want. So in this case, it's a body temperature. And then you create the HK health store. And finally, you request the authorization to share. Now, you can see that on the screen, there is the body temperature. That's what user gets to choose. He can choose body temperature. He can choose something else. He may choose not to give you that information as well. So handle that very well. Try to handle that in the code. It's not try. You have to. Right. And finally, when you want to save, you use the hkquantity.create again because you have to tell the Apple system that you are looking for a body temperature. You create the quantity. So that's where you set Fahrenheit and the value, if it's centigrade and that value. And then you use the HK quantity sample dot from type. You pass in the body temperature and the temperature, the actual quantity. And then there's two information. That's the begin date and the end date. When exactly did you capture this information? And that's important. So in this example, I'm just using nsdate.now. But in your real app, you may have to use the right just begin date and the end date. And finally, you'll also have to provide the metadata, what exactly you captured, where exactly, what's the sensor location that you did. So in this case, since the body temperature, the HK body temperature sensor location was from the body. And then finally, you go and save this data, healthstore.save object. And once you save that, if the user has the health app, which comes with iOS 8, he can see that information right inside that. So he has that show on dashboard. He can enable that so that that information is seen there. Now, the way you query this data is very simple. Again, you create the HK object type dot get quantity type. You say what you're looking for. You're looking for a body temperature. And the next thing that you see is the sort descriptor, which is nothing but a filter query. Maybe someday, Link can do a better job, but right now this is how you do it. So you provide a sort descriptor. You ask basically, I'm looking for the data based on the sort identifier end date, and then you get this. You create the sample query, which also takes in a results handler. So when this query gets executed, your handler gets executed, and then you get that information there, and you finally code that up. Yeah. Few changes to the core image. The new detectors out there. Have you used the Quest app? Evolve Quest app, did you? Did you see the QR code detector? So that's using the latest stuff. There's also a rectangle detector, which is very cool. So there are new filters added to the core image that you can use if you're building some image manipulation application. You can make use of the new filters. You can also have custom filters in your code. All these features can be used inside the video itself. This detection happens in the video as well. So here's that Quest app I was talking about. So it has this rectangle detector. If you look at that, Mike's ID card. So it detects that rectangle exactly. And also you can see the QR code. Basically, that example has an overlay. Once I detect the QR code, I'm just adding a red overlay on top of it just to identify the QR code. So you can have this. And the classes that you're going to use is CI-detector.create rectangle detector and CI-detector.create QR detector. So previously, only facial detection was allowed. Now you have two more things, right? So here's the code for rectangle detector. You create a context, just like how you work with core image. You first create a context, and then you provide the option, which is what level of accuracy you're looking for. And then you create the rectangle detector with your context and options, and then you get the image and the rest of the code. It's self-understandable, right? OK, did anybody attend the talk, Mike's talk on SceneKit today? Did you? OK. So now, creating 3D is easy using SceneKit. OK, it's very simple. It has a scene graph API, and it is very, very cool. So I'm not going to go into the depth. All that I want to say is Apple says it's for casual 3D games. You can pretty much do a lot of 3D things using this. If you're an OpenGL expert, you can also customize it to use OpenGL. So it's very, very simple and a neat library. It does abstract away a lot of OpenGL stuffs. But if you wish to work with OpenGL, you still have that option. And the good thing about SceneKit is it very well integrates with the other Apple frameworks like Core Animations and Core Image, Core Graphics. So it works very well together. So here's an example. First thing is you will create a scene. When you're working with SceneKit, you create a scene, and then you provide nodes to it. So if you want a lighting, that's a node, right? So you create the sphere here in this case. You create the scene node, and then create a vector. I'm actually adding a light. That's the blue light that you're seeing there, right? That's omnidirectional light. So I'm creating that. And then you also see the purple light, which is an ambient light. So adding that, again, it's also creating a new SCN node. And then finally, setting the camera. Camera is basically what kind of a view, how much of a view you want. So you can move the camera along, and then the view changes. And then finally, adding those, all the nodes to the root node. That's it. It's very simple. OK, finally, PhotoKit. Now it's become very easy to access photos and videos of the users because Apple gives you a photo kit. Now, I do not know why Apple decided to use PH instead of PK. I don't know if anybody knows. Does anybody know why? I don't know. But it's interesting. So maybe something is coming up with PK, right? So there's PH. PH asset.fetch assets is what you use to get the data. And if you want to write changes, you use the photo library observer class. So now you see that I pick a photo, and I add a grayscale effect to that. And then immediately, that did, not sure if you can see that, but that grayscale is, it's written back. So now everybody who's using that photo picker, they automatically get that updated version there. Right. With that, let's get into a simple demo. Do you know about app extensions? App extension that came in, right? It's pretty cool, right? You can have a keyboard extensions, you can have a today widget. So here's how you do it in Xamarin. So to create an extension, you go to File, New Solution, and then select iOS, go to the Unified API. Here's the extensions, and you have all the extensions listed here. Action extension, if you're building a keyboard, you have the option to build that using custom keyboard extension. You can use a document picker extension, the iCloud thing that you saw there. If Dropbox have to build it, that's how they do it. Document picker file provider extension, then photo editing, share, and today extension. What I did for this demo is I built a today extension that's basically an extension that comes in the today screen in the notifications area. Right? So that's what is over here. And the most important thing when this gets created is go to the plist and go to the source. Under NS extensions, there is a NS extension point identifier. Now, this is very important how you identify your extension. So this is what detects that, hey, this is a today widget, right? So this has to be there. So this is automatic when you create this template from the template, but if you're not creating from the template, make sure you add this information in your plist. Now, extensions are not separate stuff. They have to coexist with your app. That means you need to have your app. So here's my app, which is extension demo. So when you create your widget, make sure, let me open the plist again. Make sure your namespace is written, the naming is written right. So you use the same the one that you wrote for the app, which is extension demo, and then you can extend it saying that this is a widget, right? That's important. So this app is nothing but a simple app with a web view, which actually shows an evolve website. It's basically an evolve counter. Okay, so let me show that to you right now. So just swiping down, you can see that. Do you see an evolve countdown there? So you can see that -2 days until evolve. It's a bug. I didn't fix it. I didn't want to mess up the demo, so I didn't recompile it. So what it was doing is until the evolve date, it was actually saying what is the count, right? And it also has a nice animation. And when you click on this, there is a button there, tap here to register. So you click on that button, and basically that app opens up. Now you can do technically whatever you want over here. So it just shows the evolve website, that's it. So this app is the app that got opened up from the today widget, which is nothing but a web view, which is using this website to display there, right? And now let's go to the widget itself. If you go to the widget, this is what the important thing over here is in the widget, you don't work directly with the content size. You work with the preferred content size, okay? Once you set that, and it's very simple. In the storyboard, I basically have widget title and button, That's all I have there. And pretty much a nice animation that you saw, that monkey coming in, that's this piece of code. And you have the title with saying 0 days until evolve, set title, and all those things. And then when you touch on this particular button, you basically open up that app. Now, the way you open up, you can see that it is using the URL, which is evolve countdown : /. So you guessed that, right? You need to set that up correctly. You can also do this here. Go to options, iOS application, advanced. See that? You need to register for a URL scheme. That's your evolve countdown. Once you set that up, when you fire that, your app opens up. That's it. It's a very simple one. Cool. So it's pretty easy to build an app extension. So if you're building keyboard extensions, choose keyboard extensions and handle things appropriately. There's a lot more, right? It's not just what I spoke here. There's a lot more to it. There are new manual camera controls that have been added. So if you're working with, if you're something like Instagram where you're adding some camera controls, you can directly work with those APIs. I did not go into HomeKit, but as I told you, you can use this HomeKit to build your future home. Pretty much you can do a lot of things right now with iPhone. There's CloudKit. There's a nice handoff feature which works in conjunction with the Yosemite. You can use that. There's Touch ID authentication if you want to authenticate your user from your app, right? From your own app. Like anybody using 1Password? Yeah, it does it really, really well. So you can use the Touch ID authentication there. App extensions I talked about. There's unified storyboards, right? Now we have more devices, right? There is 6 Plus with a lot more screen sizes. So now Apple gives you a unified storyboard. Now that's directly supported in Xamarin as well. So you can use the storyboards to make it work in all the devices. There's SpriteKit, there's Metal, and there's also Apple Pay. I don't think NFC is exposed directly. You only have Apple Pay. So that's the SDK that you'll be working with. So all this information is available in this link. You don't have to remember this. It's very simple. developer.xamarin.com. You go there, select iOS, and there is a section called Introduction to iOS 8. Just click on that. You have all the list of features there. If you're creating app extensions, there's a whole lot of documentation out there. There's a lot of things out there. Right. I'll take up questions. Last session before we head to Georgia Aquarium, right? Is there any question? Yeah. Yeah. The handoff feature. So you need to upgrade to Yosemite. What it does is you can do anything in the phone, and then the rest of the thing can be handled in your Mac. For example, if the phone call is coming up, right, the call can be answered in the Mac itself. So that's the handoff feature. So you were doing something in iPad, right? You can hand it off, let's say the way Safari does. You can hand it off while going to iPhone maybe, or Mac. So you can continue your work there. So there's an API for that. So if your app wants to use it, so if you have apps in all the 3 places, you can use that. Any other question?
What's your feeling about stability right now about the all new frameworks?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of noise around photo keys.
Yeah. You're asking about stability with Xamarin?
No. Health kit was removed 2 hours or so afterwards, after the release. So what's your feeling about stability right now?
I think when Apple does it, I know that would have gone for some time, but definitely I think as I told you before, if you were to work with independent sensors, right, it would be a lot more difficult to do that, and not many people will be trusting that. But when it's Apple, people will trust more, right? So I think it is stable. That's what I feel, right? It is, and I know it's sensitive, but Apple handles it really well. So you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, I don't have that feeling because I've been dealing with photos and they screwed a lot of things. Including photo key stability. It seems quite
So when you say stability, what exactly are you facing? What's the trouble that you're facing?
The thing that I don't know if you're aware, but they when they launched between Beta 5 and Goldmaster C, um, for an iOS 7 application um, using LS's library, the, the suddenly for an iOS library, camera roll disappeared and become recently added, which is essentially 1 month of photos.
Okay.
And then they launched 8.01,
Mm-hmm.
correcting it,
Mm-hmm.
and then removing it, then 8.02,
Okay.
correcting it. PhotoKit, we've just found a bug to Apple because we found a bug in getting images,
Right.
fetching images. So I don't know. What is your experience? Mine is not the best so far
I mean,
with iOS 8.
Yeah, there are many bugs right now. Probably in the new WebKit framework also UI WebView is broken. If you select a drop down in the UI WebView without any customization, it crashes. It's a very famous bug in their site. There are many issues in iOS.
Yes, those issues are not. I don't know if people are aware, but and they are taking a lot of time in the reviewing apps right now.
okay.
Because a lot of people is trying to upgrade,
Mm-hmm.
and for instance, we took a lot of time trying to understand what was happening with PhotoKit, and in fact it was something on their side
Okay.
because there's an library. So I'm just trying to
So
upgrade.
okay.
You're saying that's amazing, and which in fact it is.
Yeah.
So it's not stable.
Yeah, probably. I think we'll get there. But I did not work with PhotoKit, so I did not face any much issues with that. But the other features that I worked with, I tried the health kit, but I didn't face any kind of that issues. Maybe just me. Yeah.
You said you've played with HealthKit a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So does it allow you to run things in the background? So I mean, for example, if you've got a sensor and you're using HealthKit, you're going to want to be updating things constantly in the background or doing something in the background. And at the moment, as far as I can see, the backgrounding has various types,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't seen one that says, a HealthKit app. So, I mean, how does that work? Or is it just currently that's not there? I mean, is it there?
I don't know. What I can do is we can take this offline. I know who knows this answer. It's Mike Bluestein.
Oh,
Uh,
I know.
yeah. So we can get there. Cool.
It just seems that's where it should be, but
Uh-huh.
I can't see it. It may just be that at the moment they're just wanting to give you almost like a flat
Right.
interface, and then there'll be a future update or something
Correct.
more sophisticated.
We will take a look at that. Yeah. Cool. Cool. So thank you very much. Yep. Thank you.